AskReddit by aggressive back 3143. What is one profession you think is the most overhyped? Working in animation. I think a little of artists think it would be a dream job to work on movies and games. While you do get to be a part of making something culturally significant, all the animators I know have like no work-life balance. Oh, so many creative careers are like that. You're either underpaid, overworked, creatively stifled, or two or three of those things at once. Deleted. There is a trick to this that experienced graphic designers all do. Add an obvious flaw to the design. One that the customer will undoubtedly identify and point out. When they do, compliment them on having such a good sense of artistic design and say it'll take some hard work for you to get it fixed. In reality, the final unflawed design is already completed, and you just wait a few days to show it off. Removed. Why I walked away from the kitchen. I didn't want to never see my husband. Didn't drink so my liver was cool. Love cooking still. As someone who works in corporate finance, I'm literally bullshitting the majority of the time because the work is mostly automated or done early. Yes, there are finance jobs that are not related to cold calling, sales, or the stock market. I love corporate finance. If you're in the right situation, it's a well-oiled machine. YouTuber. It's extremely high pressure unless you have an alternate platform or sponsors as a backup. YouTube pushes and incentives the wrong things while also being a very dangerous platform to trust your career livelihood on. One YouTuber I used to watch religiously stopped doing it because YouTube just kept fucking over his long-form content. The algorithm hates history, long videos, and non-political topics. Max TV for the curious. Deleted. From what I've seen of my mates there, working at the Big Four can be overrated due to brutal hours, intense stress, a cutthroat competitive culture, and overstandardization leading to a surprising lack of creativity in problem solving. The lack of creative critical thinking seems to be the big one burning their future prospects. This all often leads to burnout, making the prestige not worth the personal cost for many. Personally, I always considered it a charmless cookie-cutter career path, but hey, somehow they are still known as the big physician here. I'd say being a doctor is pretty overhyped. The training is brutal and most of the time you feel like a cog in a machine. When you do something cool like actually help a patient, which that's all you ever really wanna do anyway, you spend about 2x as much time on mindless paperwork as you did treating the patient. Life coach. No need for any training but claiming expertise. I know a guy who claims to be a life coach. The dude is almost 40, no career, never learned or studied anything, living at the back of his parents' house and has no real job. Plays video game tournaments for a few dollars. Really, dude? Social media influencers. Is that even a profession? Motivational speakers. I've heard that can lead to living in a van down by the river. Software dev. People think we do some kind of crazy shit and I'm here staring at code barely knowing what I'm doing half the time. The key isn't to know what to do, it's to Google search what you need to do effectively. Thank you, underemployed Indian YouTuber, you've saved my ass multiple times. Realtor. You're a middleman that gets paid way too much for how little you do and how little training is required to do what you do. Your job only exists because the bureaucratic bullshit surrounding purchasing a home is written into law. People have been buying or trading things directly from each other forever and yet somehow you've wedged yourself into the middle of this transaction like a fucking tick. Is it competitive? Every realtor I know is doing something else majority of the time or spend all their money on gas driving all over showing homes. Nurses. Look, we do a hard job but the vast majority of us are worthless sacks of poo who got into this because it's steady money and couldn't give a shit less about your health. praising us for doing the bare minimum of our jobs is just silly. I think nurses are valued, rightly or not, for doing what most people don't want to do. We spend most of our lives sanitized away from illness and death that anyone who is willing to go into that environment and at least somewhat effectively function may correspondingly get a lot of thanks and credit, whether they want it or not. Growing cannabis is not the cool job you think it might be. Okay, so not really a profession, but there is a certain subset of musicians who are also wannabe influencers. Particular people who are very on Twitter, so backstabby and cloud hungry. In terms of how much chefs are valorized compared to what they actually do, i.e. make people's dinner, I would say they are the most overhyped. The top 0.00001% are overhyped. Beyond that, I think most people only notice the chef when they make a mistake. Doctor. All that time in school and all the debt accumulated just to end up doing what the computer and administrators tell you to. Scared shitless to think for yourself for fear of losing your job or your license. I know a whole lot of doctors who have to just order ridiculous unnecessary shit all day in fear of litigation. Very few of them are happy. Fuck that. Investment bankers. Aren't they just hyped for making boatloads of money though? Which they do. Teaching. Teaching an actual, rigorous subject. Have fun grading mountains of papers, petty and school politics, and a culture that constantly shits on your craft. Teaching, unfortunately, is one of those professions where the whole world seems to know way more about your job than you do. Actors. Movies in the 80s and 90s always seemed to think fashion designer for a magazine was the peak of all careers. Guys were always a cop. Veterinarian. I'm not a vet but a vet tech for 13 years. People's and trained aggressive dogs trying to bite you, pee and poop and various other fluids on your body definitely, long hours, pet owners can be enormous assholes. And I capped out at $20.50 per hour. The vets I know do not make that much money, think upper 5 figures, and their job is so hard. People are so awful. You do get to pet puppies and kittens sometimes, maybe once a month, and there are some owners who are absolutely lovely. Plus veterinary medicine is just kinda cool. I was an orthopedic surgical technician. Don't even get me started on emergency. I lasted 2 months I think. You literally kill almost every single fucking pet that comes in and 90% of them are because the owners can't pay. It's just awful on all fronts. Just do your research and buy decent pet insurance y'all. It would change the profession entirely if the patients were insured. Congress. Any physical science field. You bust your ass 5x harder than anyone else and end up making half of what some bum with a business degree does. STEM is a massive joke. People say we need scientists but we get paid shit. Academia. Was in that world for years, as an instructor, researcher, and academic librarian, essentially a combination of the previous two things. They're generally tenure track professorships, at larger universities at least, at various points. People think professors are just living in the lap of luxury, just spending all their time reading the books they want to read, and kicking back at their lake houses over the summer. Boy let me tell ya, that shit is not glamorous and it pays like shit. It's mostly just doing other people's research and getting almost no credit, slogging through bureaucratic nonsense, writing conference papers no one will care about 0.05 seconds after you present it but ya gotta do it if you want tenure. Grading papers, 75% of which are fully plagiarized or AI generated, and alcoholism.